Hello, this is English 1302, paper 3, which is your final writing assignment. It is imperative. Please make sure that you follow these audio instructions for paper 3 exactly. Paper 3 will be a comparison contrast paper with MLA documentation. You should already have submitted thesis statements in advance, and you will also need to submit a brief outline in advance. So be sure and look those up in your weekly lessons. The thesis statements most likely were the week before the actual paper and outline is due. Paper 3 submissions that do not have an outline or 4 thesis statements, which are important pieces of your pre-writing documentation, will not be graded or receive credit. There are too many opportunities for people to plagiarize materials, just cut and paste and turn them in as their own papers. So I need proof that this is indeed your paper. So give me your pre-write, your 4 thesis statements. From one of those 4, you finalize the one that will be the thesis of your paper, and also the outline that you have created before you do the actual writing of this paper. If you choose not to do these assignments, I choose not to grade your paper. This is part of your paper 3 requirement. In other words, follow the instructions for the paper 3 assignment fully and do your own work. Do not submit a paper that you've written for another class, a paper that your brother wrote, or anything that you cut and pasted off of the internet. Respect the list of topics that I have asked you to avoid and submit only your personal original work. I have received questionable submissions for several writing assignments this semester. Consequently, requirements on this paper have been designed to limit the submission of plagiarized materials, which is illegal and very unfair to students who have fairly and honestly completed their assignments. So you've already seen this. Create 4 possible thesis statements for your research comparisons contrast paper number 3. Select meaningful topics. Each of these statements should be complete with supporting arguments. You're to use the tool that I gave you, the link that I gave you that will help you to create a thesis statement with 3 supporting points. I'm going to use as my example the first one that I've given you here. Although both cats and dogs are popular pets in American households, these domestic friends differ in general personality traits, required care and attention, and overall expense to the family budget. So the bulk of this paper is going to be contrast, how dogs and cats differ. Okay, so you're going to do 4. I only have 3 here on the example. You're going to do 4 different statements. From the 4 that you have already created, select 1 to research and structure your argument for paper 3. Now, when I use the word argument, it is merely the thesis of your paper. It doesn't have to be controversial to be argumentative. You can argue anything. You're just trying to convince me, almost like process analysis, to do something. Use the template for argumentative essay to create the structure of your paper and the point to point, and then within that we're going to do subject to subject method of comparison contrast to support the points within the body of your argument. 4 sources must be paraphrased or quoted and properly documented within the text of the paper and on a corresponding works cited page using MLA documentation. All resources must have an author. So I see that listed by author's last name within your paper and author's last name on your works cited page. If it doesn't have an author, do not use that source. You can find the information that you want to use in another place with another author, with an acknowledged author. You should always outline. Okay, but for this paper, you are required to turn in an outline. Create a basic outline using the 5-paragraph argumentative format as your guide. For this paper, follow the subject-to-subject method of comparison contrast within the structure of each body paragraph. So I'm using the example of dogs and cats. Okay, now intro. In my intro, I need to find for my first paragraph, an interesting attention-getting story narrative And here in my outline, I've said I'm going to research and cite an interesting, attention-getting narrative about dogs and cats. It can be anything. This will give me my first opportunity to have a citation within my paper. Now I need to transcend somehow from my story to my thesis statement, so make sure you do that. Okay, this story is an example of a concept shared by many Americans today, or many people today. Although both cats and dogs are popular pets in American households, these domestic friends differ in general personality traits, required care and attention, and overall expense to the family budget. Now, this thesis statement has already created for me the structure of the paper, which in the body section is going to be point to point. And the 3 points that we're going to discuss are going to be number 1 first, personality, number 2, care, and number 3, expenses. Okay, so those are the 3 paragraphs within the body. Now, as I discuss them in the body, however, my point is personality, then I go subject. I'm going to talk about A, the personality of dogs, and all about dogs. Then I'm going to discuss B, in parallel form, everything about cats, and it should be parallel to dogs. I go to the next point, which is care. I talk about dogs. Keep this the same structure, the same pattern throughout. Dogs are first. Dogs need to be walked, bathed, monitored, and are in constant need of attention. All about dogs. Then B, cats. Cats are picky feeders, but they don't need as much attention. They can live inside or outside. I need to make these thoughts parallel to dogs. All right, my last point that I'm going to argue is expense. Dogs are expensive. They need food, they need vet care, they need constant grooming, they need grooming, yes. And B, cats. Less medical expense, less grooming. They groom themselves, pretty much. However, cats are not as cheap as we may think, because cat food is very expensive, okay? Now, I need to come up with a conclusion. Now, please do not restate the same, thesis that you gave me in your intro, but you need to return to that thesis, okay? And then you need to make it universal. So what's my universal, what's my universal conclusion about dogs and cats? Am I going to say that one's better than the other? Okay? Here is where, in an objective paper such as this one, I can bring myself in. I'm a dog person, okay, me personally. I'm a dog person who was adopted by the world's smartest cat, okay? He rules my family of 4 dogs and 2 human beings. We love all our 4-legged children, not in spite of, and this is my universal statement, but because of the variety of experiences and love they bring to our household. And I need to expand upon this, but that's my general statement. I didn't say one was any better than the other. You can, whatever conclusion you come to. My conclusion is I love all of my 4-legged children. This paper should be 1,000 to 1,500 words. The body of this paper may not be written in first person. Use the third person academic objective point of view. Personal experiences for the final support of your argument may be included in the concluding paragraph only. Again, select a meaningful topic which affects us locally or nationally, of which you have specific interest, passion, and experience. As before, I would certainly prefer you not write about. Now, I have a list of hot political topics, okay? It's not that I do not respect your opinion on these issues. It's that there's so much information out there, and it's so easy to plagiarize someone else's work that I really don't want to read somebody else's paper. And the easiest way for you to prove to me that this is your work is to focus, give me a smaller focus, a more focused paper that is a personal passion of your own. Certainly you're not going to use dogs and cats because I've used that as my example. Local issues will help me determine that the work is your own, as I said, not taken from an outside force, and honestly, more interesting for me to read. And you should consider your audience. I am your audience. I have asked you, please, do not write about the legalization of marijuana. How many papers have I had to read about that? Okay, how many times do I read about these same topics over and over? So it's your challenge to make your paper interesting to your audience. And I am your audience. So if I've asked you not to write about political issues of the day that are on the news every day, then I expect you to understand why. And it's basically because I want to make sure this work is your own. Also, such major topics I have presented here are very difficult to argue in a short paper. Okay? Furthermore, a thesis does not have to be controversial to be argued. It doesn't have to be controversial. Okay? You can argue anything. Important note concerning the sample essays. Most of the sample essays in this course were written as speeches, newspaper or magazine articles, or perhaps a chapter or introduction to a book or anthology. These essays are not research papers and therefore do not have works cited pages or MLA documentation. I think the best example here is the Singer Solution to World Poverty, because Singer has strong arguments and uses specific examples to support them. However, he does not cite his statistical claims. And personally, I believe that his arguments would have been stronger had he given me the source of his information. But this was an article written for a magazine. These essays were written for a different purpose and in a different format. Magazines do not want to give space to, nor do they care about works cited. And my personal feeling is perhaps they should, but they are not going to give space for a works cited, and most people are turned off of that. So please remember, your sample essays are that. They're essays. You're moving on to a research paper. You must follow a higher standing of writing requirement. You must follow MLA guidelines and document all reference sources. When you do make a statement, do not make statements of fact that are not proven to be so. This is one of the main reasons that I prefer you stay away from hot topics. For example, let's talk a minute about the Trayvon Martin situation. George Zimmerman, in truth, did not murder Trayvon Martin. He was found not guilty in a court of law. However, he did kill Trayvon Martin. This is an unfortunate, proven, and admitted fact. If it is your opinion that George Zimmerman is a murderer, you would need to clearly state this as your opinion. In my opinion, George Zimmerman is a murderer. Okay, and give me facts that support that. Okay, which is what lawyers against him tried to do. All of your sources of fact outside general knowledge must also be from an acknowledged authority. No bloggers or unauthored references. Okay, so if you're going to quote somebody and they say George Zimmerman is a murderer, then you need to give me that information. John Smith believes George Zimmerman murdered Trayvon Martin. He stated so in his article, blah, 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 blah. Yes, you can state that, but you may not say that he is a murderer because he was found not guilty in a court of law. This is another problem with hot topics, because so much of the information that we argue about in our daily lives has not been proven or yet gone to court. As you research, you will find many examples of writers making statements as fact which have not been proven to be so. Politicians and lawyers do this all the time. You may not do this in a paper, for this paper, of course. If you quote such authors, make sure you present their statements as their opinion. Okay? Senator so-and-so believes. You can say that. Okay? That's the best way to approach it. This paper is to be written in an academic, third-person, objective point of view. It is not to be written in the style of a personal essay or even a magazine or news article. Do not use the pronouns we, you, or I. Find new and better words to describe the situation objectively. You will not be given instructions, as I am doing so here. You will be reporting and evaluating. If you wish to include your personal opinions, and I've said this before, do so only in the concluding paragraphs to strengthen your argument and give the paper a final personal touch. Only the conclusion may be written in the first person. You may do that. That will strengthen your paper. That will make it personal, and then give it a universal quality. Dogs and cats are loved by everybody, and important too. One of the things about concluding your paper is think about how your argument, however small it may be, is important to the future of our happiness. Okay, so that's just kind of the universal thought. How is it going to help future generations? Evaluate your argument with Elevate. Elevate is the word. Your argument with outside research, which must have an acknowledged author. I've said this many times. Cannot be from Wikipedia or any generic site with no acknowledged author. I state this over and over, and you're tired of listening to it or reading it, but you wouldn't believe how many papers I get, and Wikipedia and SparkNotes are the sources. Those are not college-level sources. Absolutely no blogs. Okay, look for an acknowledged authority to support your position. So that needs to be someone who at least works for a newspaper, works for a magazine, is a published author. 4 sources must be cited in the text of your paper and on the works cited page. Do not include any sources on the works cited which are not cited within the text of your paper. Hence the title, Works Cited. Your works cited page is not a list of books about this topic. That would be a reference page or for further reading page. Works cited means you have quoted or paraphrased this author somewhere in your paper. His last name appears somewhere in your paper, and there's a corresponding last name with further publishing information on the works cited page. Make sure you edit and proofread carefully for sentence structure and grammar. Practice your grammar skills using the Rules for Writers website daily to fine-tune your punctuation skills. I'm still getting emails that don't have commas in them, okay? No comma splices, fragments, or fused sentences. Eliminate wordiness and edit unnecessary information and redundancies. See your manual for further information. Most students understand that quotations must be cited. However, all paraphrased information which is not common knowledge must also be cited. The citations are connected by the use of the first word of the works cited entry, and that will be the author's last name. For example, okay, here is paraphrased information. At the age of 22, the gifted and attractive young Krauthammer suffered from a life-changing spinal cord injury which left him paralyzed from the waist down and denied him future use of one entire arm. Ironically, the 2 books found on the deck of the pool where he and his college friends had been diving shortly after Krauthammer was retrieved from the water were The Anatomy of the Spinal Cord and Man's Fate. Now, here's the citation. Hallowell, period. Okay? Now, that's all that needs to be in the paper. This is not general knowledge. You probably didn't know that Charles Krauthammer was in a very bad diving accident and broke his back. Okay, that's what this is about. This information is not general knowledge. I need to give credit where I found it. Where did I find it? Well, I go to the works cited page, and I know from reading the paper that Mr. Hallowell or Miss Hallowell gave me this information. That's all that needs to be in the paper. For the publication information, I go to the works cited and I find the matching citation, which is Hallowell Billy. Okay, Billy wrote an article. Ever wonder about the story behind Charles Krauthammer's tragic accident? Okay, Conservative Star opens up. That is the entire title of the article. I found it on the Blaze, which was a website, so it should be in italics. The Blaze Incorporated, that's the publisher of this website. This article was published on October the 28th, 2013. There's the magic word, web. I look for that. And then 12 June 2015 is the day that I looked up this information. Okay, this is a correct method of citing a web article. Okay, this was a web article. It was from the Blaze. This is MLA documentation. Anything that is not general knowledge. Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. General historic dates, birth dates, they do not have to be cited. That's general history. It's supposed to be general knowledge. And then there's that gray area in between. But if it's something that you had to look up, then go ahead and give it proper citation. For further reference, however, next semester when you're writing about literature or summarizing the story would be considered common knowledge. And it's because I have assigned you the story and you're writing about a story. So if you're writing and analyzing a story, The assumption is your audience knows what you're writing about. So that is common knowledge. It doesn't have to be cited. I know, I'm your reader, I know the story also. An outside interpretation, however, is not your own and would need to be cited. And of course, quotations from the text are cited by author's last name. An unnamed American man and young woman, Jig, are waiting for the express train from Barcelona. They are on the terrace of a small station bar. This is the story of Hills Like White Elephants. It's a summary. It does not need citation. This is knowledge we all share because we've all read the story, and no outside criticism or opinions have been presented within this summary. It's just the summary of the story. No citation. You must follow the format presented here exactly to receive credit for this assignment. Generic papers which do not follow the given prompt cause the authorship of your submission to come into question. I'm really sorry about that, but there's so much plagiarism out there. Make sure I know that this is your own work. Follow this prompt exactly and respect the hot topics I've asked you not to write about. Make sure your 4 thesis statements and paper 3 outline have also been properly submitted by the given due date within your lesson plans and on the course menu. Thanks.